Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to dye some yarn with 6 different flavors of Gatorade. I have done this once before with 2 flavors of Gatorade, and you guys have been asking me to do more. So because of your requests and a sale at my grocery store, I am really excited to try this out with a bunch of colors. The Gatorade contains food coloring, which is how we're going to color the yarn, and citric acid. And I remember from last time that the citric acid is enough for these colors to bind to the yarn. Let's get started with our rainbow. Today we are going to dye KnitPicks Chroma Twist Bulky. This yarn is 70% Superwash Wool, 30% Nylon, and if you would like to learn more about it, you can find my affiliate link in the video description. We are going to pre-soak this yarn in some plain tap water for a minimum of 30 minutes. Now let's start dip dyeing. In each case, I'm going to start by pouring the Gatorade into my little pan and heating it up. This color is Fruit Punch, and it has red number 40 in it. As time goes on, I might leave some of the extra warm water in here, removing some volume as needed, so that way I can add in the next quart of liquid. Chroma Twist only comes with one tie, so I added a reusable zip tie to help keep things ordered. Alright, we are nice and hot, so let's start dipping. I only want to dip. This yarn is not, it's funny, this one did not pre-soak super easily, and it is not going into that pot super easily. Let me grab my tongs. You can see that the yarn is already starting to pull up this red color. Interesting. It's definitely not as wet as I thought it was. You can see like on that edge. Different yarn bases sort of will behave differently with different techniques, and I think I've only dyed this one with dip dyeing once before. But you can see that I'm getting a really nice intense color on the yarn, but I'm also not using a ton of the yarn. I think that if I was dipping faster, we would get more color. But now, towards those edges, we are getting a lot more of a pastel type pink. And if you wanted to leave this aside, I'd make sure the heat's on low. But I think you could rig something so that way you weren't standing over the pot holding it. But we are clearing. It's a little slower than I thought. Maybe there's a lot more color in this one. I feel like the first time I used Gatorade, the color soaked up so fast that I was not prepared for it. This is a beautiful, beautiful color. I think of all of the colors that we're using today, this, with maybe the exception of the purple, this one, this red, has the most food coloring in it. I'm expecting like the lemon lime to not have very much color at all. And I feel, look at our skein. Yeah, we've got red on a lot of it. So we'll see how all these colors overlap. But that is part of the fun. There's just a hint of pink in there now. I now have a dry twisted hank of stroll fingering weight yarn to use as what I like to affectionately refer to as a dye mop. You can see that we're soaking up some of those residual pinks and clearing out some of the color so that way we can continue to use the same pot. And after just about a minute in the pot, you can see that we have cleared it. And I'm going to set this aside in case we need to use it with any of the other colors. Now I'm going to add this orange pink type color, which is called Strawberry Lemonade. And it has red 40 and yellow number 5. From here on out, I'm not going to show the pouring of each of the colors as we heat them up, but I will make sure to give you the flavor name and the food coloring content. Okay, I have shifted the skein so that way as we dip in, we can cover some of the red, but also get some of this color into the next segment, which doesn't look like it's going to look that orange. It is looking rather pink. If the store had had some orange flavored, I probably would have gone with that, but sometimes you do with what you have and what the store has. I could dip further, but the reason why I'm sort of staying here is that I don't mind if it's a little pastel. Maybe we'll get some orange when we sort of go over the lemon lime next. Actually, that is fairly pastel now. We've got a lot of red on here, but I mean, you can just see how in comparison our dye bath is mostly clear and we have way less pigment in our yarn and it took a lot less time. So I'm going to go ahead and toss our yarn mop just in the other side down just to clear this out. And then we are going to add the next color and start heating that up. This is Lemon Lime and it contains yellow number 5 and blue number 1. And I'm expecting that it will not be ultra pigmented. Maybe I should rotate this way a little bit. But maybe it'll give us some of the orange tones that we missed before. This color is a lot more dilute than some of the other ones, and ultimately I think both in terms of the amount of food coloring, but we also now have a greater volume of water in the pot, which just means that things can take a little more time to absorb. But you can see as I add like a little more yarn into that yellow, we're not getting a ton of pigment on there. Some blues in general take longer to absorb, but alright, we got most of that yellow on our yarn. So I'm going to set that down and add our yarn mop, which is starting to get a little untwisted. I am going to remove some of the liquid this time before I add in our next color, but you can see just like how quickly we soak up that little bit of extra color. Flavor number 4 is Tidal Punch, and it's got blue number 1 and yellow number 5. And even though I'm going in there, I'm not going to shift a little bit because I do not want to lose all of our yellows. But you can see we're starting to run out of white. Uh-oh. Probably because I went a bit too big with that red at the beginning. Ooh, that's really pretty. Yeah, the purple might just have to go onto the pink. This is real pretty. Now, I've mentioned already, blues take longer to absorb. And this color was reasonably pigmented in the bottle. So it might just take a little more time. And you can see that it does look like the water is getting progressively more blue. That's because the yellows will strike a little bit before the blues. It's harder to get a color like this to, quote, break, where you see separation between the blues and the yellows, but it can be possible. And I'm honestly not sure what the pH is of the setup right now. But one thing we could do is we could wrap the rest of this around a spoon and sort of leave it in a little bit, or I can just stand around and chat with you, or the final choice of what could be done with that little bit of blue is decide, okay, I want this one to be a little green anyway. Let's put in our yarn mop to absorb the rest of that color. I think that this chroma, the Chroma Bulky yarn that we're using, and you can see that we soaked up that blue. I think that it has a little less surface area than, say, this Stroll fingering weight yarn, and that is one of the reasons that it could take a little longer for the colors to absorb. But I'm also not putting in as much of the yarn at a time. Our yarn right now is looking beautiful. We definitely don't have a ton of space for the blue and purple, but we're gonna go and give it the best we can. It's blue time. Okay. I want to, there's a lot of green. Let's overlap the green. Let's see if we can keep a little bit of white to have for our purple. Yeah, not a lot of space. This is what happens when you start off. I probably should have started it with the purple and worked my way back. It's a very pretty blue though. And we've got a lot of blue in the yarn already, and it's not even, like it has not anywhere close to started to clear yet. So that is exciting. And you can see we're getting like a really nice turquoise on the other side. I think I'm going to go a little bit more into this green, give us a little more space to work with. Yeah, I'm not even coming close to clearing that. So that blue, oh right, the color was blue cherry, and I am expecting that it's just going to be blue number 1. Yep, just blue number 1. Some blues are definitely binding here. I'm not quite ready for yarn mop, but I am curious about how much of this color that we have left. So I'm just going to quickly dip. We are in sort of a pastel territory already. So therefore, yeah. Think mop. Let's go for it. And we're starting to soak up that color, but you can see that putting this all in overall, we're starting to clear. Blues typically take a little while, but the amount of pigment that's going onto this yarn is really, really small. So if I had kept holding in the other one, it wouldn't have made a huge difference. But it's time for the Grape, which is made out of red number 40 and blue number 1. I have this so that way we're overlapping those reds and pinks, but we're also going to overlap the blue a tiny bit. I want to be careful though, because I want some of that blue to remain unpurplified. But after we absorb a little bit of color over that blue, maybe then we'll shift, do a quick dip to get a little color so we don't have any white. Then we might shift that up to put more over on that red side. In general, purple food coloring breaks, which means that you could see us get the when we talk about color breaking, it means that you can see the color mixture break apart into the sum of the parts. But I think in general, purple, like the grape color like this with red 40 and blue 1, tend to have a lot more red than blue in there. And so it can be hard on superwash yarns to see that breaking. Because, we're not seeing like a little bit of blue here at the end, but we were able to absorb that pretty quickly. And let me go ahead and toss in our mop one final time to just soak up anything that is left. Yeah, and there's pretty much nothing left in here. But now I'm going to turn off the pot, set our mop aside to cool, and let's take a look at our rainbow that we created with Gatorade. The yarn is still really hot, so I can't really order it in a very easy to see way. But we do have all of these rainbow tones. Clearly there's a lot of red. I think of all the colors, the most pigment we saw was the red, but I think that's also in order to make like a red punch. I'm even forgetting the name now. You need a lot of that red food coloring. Without it, it would look pink. In general, for this kind of colorway, it would probably be easier to hand paint the yarn on the countertop versus dip dyeing 6 times. The dip dyeing, I think, is in general a more lengthy process with these numbers of dips. However, the thing to consider since we're using Gatorade is the volume. If you were to try to hand paint with this Gatorade, you would get something that looked a lot more pastel like our yarn mop versus seeing these really, really vibrant colors from the Gatorade mixtures. I don't necessarily recommend running out and buying Gatorade to dye yarn, but if you have a lot of leftover after some event or party, it's a great way to use it up. I was able to get these bottles of Gatorade for $1 each on sale, but in general a Kool-Aid packet, which also has citric acid, the food coloring, but no sugar or sweeteners at all, those tend to be, you can get 3 of them for what I paid for one of the Gatorade bottles. So that's just something to consider. Let's wash both skeins of yarn at the same time. Look at the saturation difference between the bulky yarn and our mop, so that way we could transition. Woohoo-wee! I think that the Chroma Twist is a little unwieldy. It's so drapey, which is great. It's just a little hard to like hold, and I recommend adding way, way more ties. But I'm now adding just some liquid dish soap. The water that I'm using is cool. It's not hot, but it does have a little bit of warmth to it, just so that way I don't cut my hand from the cold. And all that color is in the yarn. Since we use Gatorade and there is sugar and all kinds of other stuff in here, I'm going to go ahead and wash this with soap one more time. I'm going to rinse it in 3 or 4 more times, and then I'll hang up the yarn to dry. Here is the finished yarn. With this Chroma Twist Bulky, we dip dyed the yarn into 6 different flavors of Kool-Aid to create this rainbow. It is predominantly red, but we do see some yellow, green, blue, and purple in there too. And all of this was created from pre-mixed, ready-to-consume liquid sports beverages. On the Stroll fingering weight yarn, we use this as sort of what I like to call a yarn mop. So that way we could keep reusing the same dye bath and soak up some of the extra food coloring molecules. I think that here, rather than a vibrant rainbow, we have a beautiful pastel that has tones of aqua, a little bit of purple, a little bit of pink, and some teals in there as well. The colors that contained red did not contain red number 3. And I think that this is consistent from what we have observed in our dye baths ourselves. If you add food coloring with red number 3 into acidic conditions, it will start to crash out. And therefore, I think that's why these beverages all use red number 40. Instead, it stays in solution better. While we got some amazing colors here, ultimately the Gatorade is not that saturated. If you wanted to get this gorgeous turquoise on a whole skein of yarn, you would need more than 1 bottle. So from a cost perspective, if you wanted to use a beverage that had citric acid in it already, Kool-Aid packets are probably a better bet. You get a little, they're cheaper than the Gatorade, they're easier to store, and they don't already have sugar or sweetener in it. That being said, it is the most cost-effective way to dye yarn with food coloring is to go out and buy the food coloring on its own. Even if you're going to pay for vinegar or citric acid, that is the way that you will be able to get the most amount of dye for your dollars. But these drink mixes are a really easy and fast way to play around with this and are just great for beginners and kids because you aren't dealing with things that are so concentrated and can make as big of a mess as a bottle of liquid food coloring drops. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. Tap that like icon, tap the bell icon to receive notifications every time I post. We have a lot of fun here, and you really don't want to miss it. If you would like to support ChemKnits on a more personal level, vote on content for new videos and more, check out the ChemKnits Patreon. It's a platform that supports fans with the content creators they enjoy, and the perks are awesome. You'll find a link in the video description and iCard. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.